we will be studying as part of the mobility study. As I said, a specific traffic analysis, traffic calming measures, recommendations will come out of that. We also have some neighborhoods, for instance, this area over here does not have a lot of through connections. How are the folks that live here going to get to the stations without going through their neighbors' yards? So those are kind of all of the mobility. How do people get there? What improvements need to be made so more people can get there, particularly without having to drive? And how, what traffic calming or other measures need to happen. Then the red area is a land use study area. And those areas are going to be more likely, not definitely. The important point of a study area is it's just being studied. That doesn't mean anything's actually going to change. But the red is more likely to be an area that transitions over time. And what that means specifically, we're going to spend the next year talking about. But that's kind of the long and the short of what it means to have a study area. As I mentioned before, the Planning Commission will have a study session to talk more about these lines on June 20th, and there'll be a public hearing on July 11th, and then it'll go to the council. So again, if you have any questions about this, we have some time, and feel free to call me or let me know, and I'm happy to explain anything else. And then we just have a few, there's a lot of folks that are saying, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this now? The point is to, and this is why the 185 SCC committee formed. It's in their mission statement, to have a very vibrant process, to have a lot of outreach and input and make sure the citizens have a voice. We're hoping that by doing this process, some places don't plan for their station areas. They just plunk a station down and then, kind of see what happens. We wanted to be more proactive. We wanted to involve the entire community, the entire city, regional folks, et cetera, because we think that there's benefits for all of these levels, starting at the highest level with the planet. The environmental impact statement is going to have some information about trade-offs, no build alternative versus what happens with light rail. What does that mean for traffic congestion? How does light rail, that's more of a regional benefit, but from the planet, less carbon. More people biking, more people walking is better in terms of reducing the city's carbon footprint, which we are calculating and benchmarking and trying to have on a downward trend. For the region, as I mentioned, traffic. We would like to not be so congested. I'm pretty sure most people think traffic is bad enough now. We have more people coming to the region. The forecast over the next 20 years is over 1 million new folks, I believe. So how are they going to get where they're going? Another benefit regionally is that, and with stationary planning, is that we'd like to develop more local jobs, more of a balance between jobs and housing. But even if you aren't able to work in the study area, you can get on the train and go to the University of Washington if you're a student, go to the airport, but also to commute back and forth to work. A big audacious goal that we are kind of kicking around is, what if you lived in the study area or the sub area, and you could have a household with one car instead of two, because one person at least could work locally or commute to work by the train. We think that's a pretty audacious goal, and you need major infrastructure like that for that to be feasible. But that's kind of what we'd like to see, and if that's what you'd like to see too, we'd like to hear more about your interest in that. It also preserves the area's natural resources. When you build closer to infrastructure, it means that the new people are coming don't have to move out to Snohomish or Snoqualmie or other areas that are currently natural areas that are currently watershed areas and stuff like that. We don't have to cut down the trees that are there because we can put them where we already have roads and power and water. For a community, it really is about quality of life. It really is about more choices, more access to opportunity for more people. And again, more jobs, and this is how you support that coffee shop that you want in your neighborhood, or that bookstore, or get that sidewalk or that street lighting that you've been asking for. On a neighborhood level, again, complete streets, walkability, vitality, placemaking. So we want to hear, again, that's kind of what will be happening this summer with FutureWise and Brock and 185 SCC is that visioning of what do you want to preserve about your neighborhood? What do you treasure? What do you value? What do you want to see change and come into your neighborhood as well? And now we can open it up to questions. As I mentioned before, since we're taping, please wait for me to give you the microphone. And who wants to start?
Maybe I missed this, but the agenda says we're going to talk about the difference between study area, comprehensive plan, and zoning designations. Did you do that?
Very briefly. I can expand. So the study area is what I explained. That's what we're going to study. The comprehensive plan has a range of potentially appropriate zoning designations. So comp plan designation kind of says this is going to be high density residential or mixed use commercial. And it's broad. And so that means a number of different zoning categories could fall under that description. Zoning is where you get to the specific, how high can your building be, how much lot coverage, what are the setbacks from the street. All those technicalities come in when you write zoning standards. So I wanted to be clear that we're going to start with the study, we're going to move to the range, and we're going to end up with specific design and transition standards.
Somebody mentioned paired stations, and either that wasn't explained or I missed it.
What stations?
Pairing the stations.
So can you clarify, you're asking about pairing of stations, why we paired them? No, what does it mean? So if there's a slide way back that talks about in segment A, which is the shoreline segment, we combined, or we're showing 1/30th with 1/45th as one paired station, and 1/30th with 1/55th. So what that means is that both of those stations would be in operation together. 1/30th with 1/45th, or 1/30th with 1/55th. Why both? Well, we have a service area that we're trying to serve. So going back to the ST2 vote, that was 1/45th. But it's a regional area we're trying to serve, and we look at both spacing of stations and what's there right now, as well as what's coming. So you have a single-family residential area. You have a area that has limited auto access in terms of the 145th has that the interchange, whereas the 155th doesn't have the same I-5 interchange in the 130th. You have the ability to serve more with 2 stations as opposed to 1 as well. We were asked by through the scoping process to look at stations, alternative stations to 145th, and the board asked us to identify those groupings to help serve the area, to provide those different modes to help compensate, for example, when 145th isn't one of the options. So there's a number of factors that went into that and to those combinations of stations. Does that make sense? I need to talk louder. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Pairing means combination of stations. Yes. Sorry.
So why were combinations identified for the southern part of Shoreline and not the northern?
Why were combinations identified for the southern part of Shoreline and not the northern? The scoping requests we got were for the 130th and 155th, as well as for 145th. We did not get scoping comments, so to speak, for other areas, so that was why we were looking at those. And again, it goes in part back to the type of neighborhoods and the spacing of the stations in terms of coupling or pairing those stations together. 130th with 155th, 130th, 145th provides more of the service, provides more service to the area. Sorry, I will talk much closer to the microphone. How are we doing this? The Q&A. You're doing it. Sorry.
You know what? I think probably the thing that makes the most sense is that microphone at the podium is on. So if you have a question, line up at the podium. If you would like for me to bring the microphone to you, if you don't want to get up and go to the podium, I'm happy to do that. But I think just in terms of getting to an order, then we can just go down the line.
Yeah, so mine's sort of a follow-up to the question that you just had, and that's the preferred alternatives that you're getting ready to study, I think, in this next DEIS. Did I hear correctly that the 185th station, you've already identified that it's going to be located on the east side?
So we have a proposed station location. All of them have the station on the east side of I-5. One of the things I could have mentioned but didn't was to cross I-5. We're starting at Northgate on the east side of I-5. To do a crossing of I-5 is very expensive. It is a significant increase in cost. So when we're looking at, for example, the freeway station or the transit center for Montlake Terrace to go to 185th and go back over is very expensive.
So may I just add, I was a member of those plannings that you had when you started first looking at the proposed sites. And I thought that the biggest issues that were being presented were, was it going to be along 99th, down I-5, or 15th? And the end result, but not specifically east side, west side of the freeway. So I'm just wondering, I don't remember that being comments, at least in the meetings I attended, that allowed you to pick the one side.
So what we did was we looked at, when we got the request to look at stations and options and such, we did an evaluation. And as so let me back up. The alternatives analysis did look at 99, I-5, and 15th. And as I had mentioned earlier, we came back to I-5 and light rail and those stations. The cost analysis that we did as part of what we presented to the board showed that crossing over to the other side of I-5 from the east side to the west was cost prohibitive. And
Right.
so that's why it didn't move. That's, I think, why the board did not identify that as moving forward.
I mean, I totally understand that. I don't feel like that was something that was covered because that the primaries were, let's see what the most, what the benefit is on those three plans. And I felt like you chose I-5 because it was sort of the least complicated and least expensive. Eminent domain, utilities, you name it. Going down the middle of a freeway is a lot easier on the side. But I don't feel like, at least when I was there, that it was discussed east, west side, and it seems like that would be more appropriate at this level here. I'm just saying I think it feels like it's more appropriate that you discuss whether it's east side, west side now versus
Yeah.
making these preferred alternatives.
Okay.
That's my question.
Okay.
We also might want to, since there's starting to be folks in the lobby having conversations and more seats are free, you might want to move in and have a seat. We could shut the doors, and that'll sort of keep the Q&A a little quieter from the folks that want to have discussions in the lobby.
I'm sorry to take that. Is that open for discussion at all anymore?
Sure. So what you'll see in the draft environmental impact statement is the analysis that was done and how we came up with the station alternatives. It does include the discussion from the alternatives analysis all the way through how we arrived at the stations that were included. So there is some discussion of that in the document that you'll see and you can comment on. Does that answer?
Right.
Okay.
Hi, you mentioned that there were some things that were not set in stone. I'd like to hear exactly what is not set in stone, because it appears to me that you've set stations in stone, like 185th. And matter of fact, you're going to the full extent of making all of the studies associated with that.
Yes. So, as I said, there are decisions that have been made, and those decisions have been primarily made through Sound Transit, through their process that they've been undergoing for the last couple of years since they got approval through the vote. And that was, to sort of look at these different station areas. And that one, I believe, was mentioned in the vote in ST2. They had 2 stations in Shoreline. So those are decisions, I mean, if you want to say that was made by the voters in 2008.
Yeah, I'll add to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we still are in a process, and as was mentioned, ST2 was the beginning, and so we have these station options. As was mentioned, 185th was identified as of now as a station, and it has been identified in multiple alternatives. Nothing is a done deal. However, it has been has gone through quite a bit of review and analysis. Something else could come up, but it has been identified as serving the area as identified in ST2, and providing that regional service. So again, we have the initial ST2, we have the analysis that we're doing right now. Ultimately, the board will make the decision on where the stations are.
Well, I just want to say that for me personally, it makes absolutely no sense to have a station there. It makes more sense to have something at 205th where you're linking many more systems and arterials and highways and everything else, rather than plopping it in the middle of a neighborhood where you have very low-level street structure, which people actually enjoy, and you don't have access to the freeway at all, and you're going to put in a 500 or 600 car parking structure of some sort there and just dump people into a neighborhood that are going to drive there. And for me, that's not the purpose, is not to disrupt a single-family neighborhood like that. So thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we understand that. And just one more second. So, but this goes back to the decisions that have yet to be made. And, most of the time when a large planning project happens, we spend a lot of time trying to say, we're going to minimize the impacts on this for everybody in the surrounding area as much as possible. In this instance, change is coming. Light rail is coming. The stations have been identified. So we're going to spend the next year and then the next, 50 years creating the vision that we come up with to figure out how to make this the most beneficial. How can you as a neighborhood, how can we as a city capitalize on this regional investment? That's a huge regional investment to bring light rail through this city. So how do we take advantage of this amenity and use it to everybody's advantage? It's also why we're starting this process 10 years before the trains are running, so that everybody has plenty of time to answer questions like, do I redo my roof? Do I redo my kitchen? What is going to happen to my house? Do I want to stay and take advantage of these amenities? Do I want to sell to a developer for as much as I can? Do I want to, move now or later? Or, what? Again, it's going to be homeowner decisions that decide how this play out. So we want to let everybody know early, often, so that you can be aware of what's going on and make the appropriate decisions for your life.
Hi, good evening. Probably residents of Shoreline and folks in official positions. I think if I tell you first offhand that I'm from Rainier Valley and I have been affected by light rail, as many of my residents have, I will say that this is a quasi-government organization, the Puget Sound Regional Council, that the city belongs to, and they will railroad over you all. Because you need to read what's going on in Rainier Valley, read it on the Rainier Valley Post, read it on Othello Neighborhood Station, but they say they would like you to share their vision. But if you don't, they're still going to fulfill their vision. So you have to look at the SEPA reviews. You have to really follow everything to the T, because stakeholders, yes, if you break up in committees, your neighborhood group gets involved, or you as an individual make your comments or go to meetings, you're a stakeholder, but the city, Department of Planning and Development does not hardly ever listen to the citizens. So please come down to Rainier Valley, talk to people. There's definitely pro-light rail folks in my neighborhood, but there's a lot of people that are against it. And the surface street light rail, it is a disaster. It's beautiful if you're in it. I mean, if you need to jump off because you might be threatened of a crime, because I rode the light rail in Florida, and that was elevated, and that was actually scary. Surface street light rail is nice if you want to escape from someone, but if you're trying to cross the street, if your police and fire are trying to get across the street and there's a chance that light rail is coming, it's very dangerous. And what I do not appreciate from our city officials, and I have not studied City of Shoreline officials to the T, but I know City of Seattle very well because I go to their meetings for these forums and these focus groups, and they do not talk about the repercussions that you're going to have. And one of them, and it's a bill down in Olympia right now, is the value capture tax. So please write this down if you at all care about taxes and don't want to have more going out the window. Value capture tax, look that up, read about it. Also, if you do not know about Agenda 21, this is social engineering You might not get it. It's hard to grasp, so you're going to have to do your research. I've been doing research for a couple years. You might get it really quick, or you might take just as long as I do to get onto it, but pay attention to the Puget Sound Regional Council. FutureWise, look them up. Look up FutureWise, see what the Rainier Valley residents have said. Thank you.
Well, the lady before her kind of stole my thunder because I was wondering about 205th Street as an alternative to 185th, just for the same reason she was bringing up. Was that ever really discussed or looked into, or for any reason? Because that whole old, like there's a movie theater and all that area over there would be prime for a large parking
So one
garage.
of the things that we're trying to do with the light rail service is to space it. So in addition to serving Northgate and Linwood, is to serve the communities in between.
Yeah.
And to do that in a way that recognizes not only if there's an interchange or not, but what kind of neighborhoods are there, the densities of the neighborhoods, and the types of neighborhoods. So there was this question about 185th versus 145th, for example. The placements of these stations in part was to provide for different types of access. 185th, yes, is not as easily accessible by car. That's more pen and bike opportunities there than 145th. 205th would be pretty close to 185th. Then you have Montlake Terrace Transit Center right there, and the freeway station. So in terms of where these were placed, it was to look at how to space them out, how to serve the communities, the neighborhoods in between, as well as the more regional. You have regional 145th, 185th more residential, Montlake Terrace more regional. So you kind of trying to serve, provide different types of service, serving different types of neighborhoods.
Okay, but it seems like at the Mount Lake Terrace Metro Center, people could take buses there and then walk over to the light rail.
So
Careful,
Mount Lake Transit Center has two different options for stations and providing bus service to get to that station, one of those stations, a freeway station or a station at the transit center.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is one of the options.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
So, I guess, do I have to say my name or anything, or? I just see the instructions here, so I'm just wondering. I guess my only question I guess I have two questions. So, my concern about providing too much accessibility to the system, right now, the light rail trains coming out of SeaTac, since I admit, when I go to the airport, I hate parking there. So I'll take the 301 or the 358 downtown. I'll take Link down to the airport. I haven't had any problems on Link. Yeah, I've taken it at night. Yeah, okay. Anything at night is spooky, okay? If you take public transit, it can get kind of dicey. Not a big deal. Just keep your wits about you, and it's not I don't have any big issues. But the issue that I've seen is, okay, during the day, it can get kind of crowded, even with the two trains going. And my concern is, even with the 7.5-minute headways, if you make it so accessible, will you have, this congestion issue to make the ride to downtown from, say, Linwood, Shoreline, that uncomfortable? Even with 10-minute headways on the 358, when I was carrying my bags to go to the airport, by the time the bus reached Northgate on 105th, it was already jam-packed and it was standing room only. So my concern is, by the time that the light rail train hits, Northgate Transit Center, the light rail cars are already filled and, slammed by the time the train reaches UW. No one's really getting off at the time the trains reach downtown, and it's going to be miserable. The second question I have is, with 145th, with or without light rail at 145th, will the city continue with a corridor improvement to improve pedestrian access on that corridor?
So I'll take question one. Okay. So a couple things. During peak hours, there'll be 4-minute headways, not 10.
Okay.
Right now you see 2 trains, two cars. There'll be 4 cars in that too. So we're going to double the number of cars as well as the frequency. Mm-hmm. And And so between the additional capacity and the additional headways, or the shorter headways, there should be adequate capacity, and you won't have what I get on the bus. I have the same experience, but that is the intention, is to provide adequate capacity and those short, very short headways to make sure that you are comfortable.
Okay.
And then second question.
And in terms of infrastructure improvement, the person to talk to would be Alicia McIntyre. She was introduced earlier. I believe she's still in the lobby. You can. Oh, she left. So call Alicia, and she worked on our transportation master plan, which was updated in 2011.
Okay.
That has a whole section on transit plan, bicycle plan, pedestrian plan. It's got a lot of maps. A lot of the maps are also in the comprehensive plan. So if you want to see kind of what is planned for the future, notice I said planned, not funded, because there's a difference. But we have a very good long-range visions for how we would like to connect the neighborhoods. And when they were starting the transportation master plan, it doesn't have a lot of details about transit because we didn't know a lot about it yet. The comprehensive plan has a little more. But we do have a long-range plan for pedestrian and bike, and we have an excellent grant writer who brought Aurora, essentially, to the city. So because we have the plan, then the grant writer goes out and tries to find money to pay for those improvements, but we have a lot planned.
Okay. So there's no official, in conjunction with the 145th station, there's no immediate pedestrian improvements to link the, Aurora with the 145th.
Now, 145th is a slightly different case. It gets a little more complicated. I don't know if you're aware. I'll just take a second to explain the jurisdictional issues.